Hi there. Today, mixed messages have been reported by Financial Times and CNBC that Washington had cancelled a preliminary trade meeting with China this week. But the White House economic aide Larry Kudlow countered that the report was untrue. So with China and the U.S. more than halfway through a 90-day trade truce and Vice Premier Liu He set to visit the U.S. for further talks, will renewed cooperation between the two sides bring more vitality and optimism to China's economic growth? What's next for China's monetary policy? And should we be worried about the slowdown of China's economy? To discuss these issues and more, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by He Weiwen, Senior Fellow at the Chongyang Institute for Financial Times of Renmin University of China, and Yang Xiyu, Senior Fellow at the China Institute of International Studies. We shall also speak to Robert Cab, Director of the Economist Corporate Network via satellite in Hong Kong. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Yang Ray. Welcome to our discussion here, gentlemen. Maybe some of the Chinese who followed the process between China and Washington are still recovering from the aftershocks of that preliminary meeting between the two sides. It could be cancelled. Of course, the White House quickly denied this and said this is a rumor. So what do you think of the mixed signals that we got from the United States?
I think there might be some problems within the White House. There are some differences among Trump's team. Some adhere to some hard lines, and others want to early agreement.
Are you suggesting that it's very difficult to have a single voice from the U.S. side?
Yeah, always. So, however, the official saying is there's no such a thing. Okay, then at least they show something, might be something differences within the White House.
It comes as no surprise from the U.S. to have such mixed feelings. After all, the Secretary of Defense and National Security Advisor were both dismissed by the unpredictable presidency of Donald Trump. This time around, are you surprised, He?
No, not at all. That's not the first time for Chinese negotiation team to face such uncertainty or unexpected changes, simply because it's well known that the Trump administration team is quite diversified. Different people have different ideas. It's difficult to make a single voice at one issue and at the same time. But facing the uncertainty and the differences, I think the safe way to follow and observe the negotiation should be based on a very official tone. For example, just now you mentioned the different tones, but between the contradictory tones, I prefer believing the official one.
A spokesperson of the Chinese Foreign Ministry, Madam Hua Chunying, did deliver an official statement saying everything will go ahead as scheduled, particularly regarding the upcoming visit by Vice Premier Liu He in 1 week's time. Let me cross over to Hong Kong, where our commentator Robert Cab is standing by. Hello, Robert. What do you make of the latest development concerning the meetings and negotiations between the two sides? Do you have any surprises to announce?
Well, nothing to announce from my side, but in terms of observations, I agree with the earlier comments that indeed in really any U.S. administration, but this one in particular, you have a variety of opinions. So you have hardliners and more dovish people on the Trump team, and then you have Trump himself, and he is, as you were mentioning, very erratic. So he could be saying one thing one day and something very different the next.
Follow-up question, Robert, is what do you think would be the most difficult issues to address before Vice Premier Liu He could possibly ink an agreement, a landmark agreement with the U.S. side, so that we could avoid having a devastating trade war?
I think it's really structural issues. I know the Chinese side has suggested an increase in volume of imports, which is a big part of what Trump has talked about. But if you actually look at the negotiations that have been ongoing and the sticking points, they're around structural issues, and that's such as intellectual property rights protection, forced technology transfer, these things that the U.S. consider deeper and more systemic problems.
Weiwen, do you agree that these are the structural issues, particularly about the disputes on IPR?
Yes, I quite agree with Rob. I think the top concern from the U.S. side is not the trade imbalance, although this is a big topic. The essence is to make China change strategically. That is, first of all, they have these three different questions. First is the protection of intellectual property rights. Second, remove of the compulsory technology transfer. And third, totally change the government role in subsidizing the industries. I think these are three issues are more fundamental for both sides to reach an agreement.
Xi, to be honest, do you think fundamentally what the United States wants is actually an agreement that they signed with the Japanese who surrendered toward the end of the Second World War on deck in Missouri? It's very much like China surrenders unconditionally. Will that be a mission impossible actually for the Chinese government to have this kind of humiliation? Or do you think, hey, Yang Rui, come on, it's just a matter of business negotiations. It's not just a zero-sum game. It's a win-win. You won't compare that to surrender. So I'd like to have your thoughts on this kind of public speculations.
Well, I don't think Trump administration and President Trump has expectation to force China to a corner and then surrender, as you mentioned, simply because they calculated the balance of forces between the two, and it's hard for U.S. to conquer, to force the partner to be surrendered. For example, the total volume of China-U.S. trade occupied about 15% of China's total foreign trade, but 16% of total U.S. trade. So basically, the dependency to the bilateral trade is similar between the two. So if U.S. want to cut off completely the trade with China, that will mean they shoot at their own foot. So basically, finally, as both Trump and Xi mentioned, finally, the two sides need to have a mutually accepted results, say compromising. So that is my expectation. But between the two, in my observation, the bilateral trade, the bilateral talks or negotiations contains two category issues: deficit, say you need to buy more, or by how much, that's a bargaining. And the secondary, as both of the colleagues mentioned, structural problems. And the core, I think the structural problems is the focus of the negotiation, because the deficit, no people, even Trump, don't believe through the trade negotiations, through the trade protection, U.S. deficit can be corrected. But the structural problems need to be addressed. That is a U.S. position. For example, IPR and some others. In short, rules. They force China to change the rules. That is the core for U.S. target for forcing China to make some changes. But in terms of changing rules, I think there have been some overlapping areas between the two. Even without the trade conflicts or trade war with the United States, China under Xi Jinping has determined to have a much bolder reform process. We call it widen openness and deepen the reform. And for example, the negative management list, something like that. We have started the deeper reform that really designed to change some of the rules in the market, so make China's economy
we will get back to discuss the Chinese economic performance in line with the latest release of the statistics by the National Bureau of Statistics. So let me cross over to Robert. Now, are you hopeful, Robert, that an agreement will be reached when when Vice Premier Liu He visits Washington?
Well, anything's possible, but at this stage, based on what I've been hearing and what I know of the two sides' positions, I would say no. And I wish I could be more optimistic, but that's my sense of where things are headed. But again, we have a very unpredictable president, so it could in fact result in a deal.
Robert says he's very pessimistic. What do you think?
I think, first of all, Liu He's visit to the United States is not the full agreement. This is only part of the agreement, of the 90-day negotiations.
So it's going to be a process,
at the end, yes, one step in the process. At the end of the 90-day, I expect there might be some kind of agreement, although this might not be the final agreement, might be the agreement for further negotiations.
Let's take a look at the Chinese economy. Release from the National Bureau of Statistics show last year the GDP was registered at 6.6. Now, some of the overseas observers don't think that's an accurate figure because they pointed out that this set of statistics failed to pinpoint the differences between different regions in China. We've read some reports that most of the provinces and autonomous regions in China impressed us with the underperformance. I mean, if not a negative GDP growth. So what do you think of the true picture?
I think this problem will be settled within 2 years. Starting 2019, the National Statistics Bureau will collect all the provincial data. The provincial government, they have no right to announce their own data. All the data will be announced by the National Statistics Bureau, and that will be standardized by 2020. So this problem will be settled. As far as to the current concern, I should say that the leading provinces, top 3, Guangdong, Jiangsu, and Shandong, and the top 4, Zhejiang, all have above the national average growth rate. So that justifies the national growth rate, 6.6.
What's your balanced picture about the economic performance of 2018? 6.6. Many from Europe say that's not very bad because anything above 6% would be very wonderful. It's significant compared with the lackluster performance of the Eurozone, for example.
First of all, I don't worry about the sliding growth rate simply because of 2 reasons. One, with the base is getting larger and larger, the growth rate will certainly go slowly. And secondly, if you look at the economic growth history in the world since 1945, no economist can keep the high growth rate more than 4 decades. The longest one is Taiwan and Japan. It's about a little bit more than 3 decades. Now China has reached the 4 decades. So, and then we have a 2 scenario: hard landing or soft landing. And I have seen a soft landing. You will see 6.6, maybe we will see 6.5 or even 4 in the following years. I think it's natural, and we really need the soft landing. We cannot keep the high growth rate at age for decades long. That would be terrible for China.
But I'm afraid that the issue, Robert, is the sense of uncertainty and lack of confidence at this moment for consumers as well as investors. Now, obviously, on the agenda of Xi Jinping and the Premier Liu He is at least one issue, tax cuts, and increasingly so, to say nothing of required reserve ratio to stimulate the monetary policy. Do you believe these measures that have been rolled out recently will help?
Well, there seems to be some impact from the lower reserve ratio requirement, because 2 things. Basically, it has gone down, it's freed up more cash, but what's most critical about that is that the money is directed to small and medium-sized private enterprises and not state-owned enterprises which have already binged on debt. And that seems to be happening, so that's some very good news. In terms of the stimulus provided by tax cuts, there should be some, but it's mitigated by the fact there's a lot of underreporting of tax in China. And I've also been hearing reports that the process, the paperwork required for getting the tax breaks is also very cumbersome. And some companies actually apparently felt penalized when they started trying to get the tax rebate. So that seems to be more of a mixed bag. But the reserve ratio requirement lowering, that has been having an impact. The problem is, though, to bear in mind, when you do that, you're also increasing risk at banks.
Again, Robert delivers a reasonable voice, a rational one about the effects of the RRR policy. Do you believe liquidity will be easily fixed with the RRR execution?
I think both in theory and practice, the further release of RRR is helpful for the economy because it releases more liquidities to support the economy. But the important thing now is not in general how they support the economy. It's where the increased liquidity go to. Do they go to the stock market, to the property market, or to the real economy? That's the most important thing. So that means we should not do it in general, but concise guidance to individual industries and the sectors.
The strong point of Wei Wen on the release of RRR seems to take us back to exactly 10 years ago when the financial meltdown took place and we got the stimulus package of up to 4 trillion RMB. Do you think this time around we keep in mind this bitter lesson? Because he said in his understatement, Wei Wen suggested that much of the money, the stimulus package, found its way to the real estate market in the disguise of SOE. This time around, do you think we are cautiously aware? I mean, we are aware of this problem.
Well, I think we will have a more sophisticated stimulus package than the one you mentioned when the global financial crisis broke out. In other words, we will not simply copy or repeat the previous stimulus policies, and we will create a new style of policy, just like Professor He mentioned. This time we will target it and enterprises oriented. So we will stimulate companies, enterprises in real economy to stabilize the economy, to stimulate the economy. So that's quite different. So from the measures, from plans and the policies will be complicated and different from before.
Wei Wen, what do you think of the impact of China's tax cut stimulus, which is estimated at $300 billion, or 1.2% of output, according to JP Morgan's estimation?
Oh yes, that's certainly helpful. However, if we want to articulate how helpful it is to the economy, we have to analyze sector by sector. And the most important thing is, I think, now the economy, the burden, we cut down the tax, release more money. That means we have fiscal support and financial support. But most of the private business, especially SOEs, their headache is not only the tax cut, but the financial burdens or the money cost. The important thing is to reduce the interest rate lending to those sectors, which is most crucial for the sustainable development.
Premier Li Keqiang paid a visit to PBOC a few weeks ago to show up confidence about providing loans on an equal basis to SME. But strong reasons still linger that state-owned banks would find it difficult to give loans to those of the private economy on the issue of credibility. But having said this, last May, the government cut value-added taxes for manufacturing, transportation, construction, telecommunications, and farm produce industries, followed by a cut in personal income taxes and the introduction of more deductions. Earlier this month, the State Council announced a $29 billion annual tax cut plan for small companies. Obviously, external pressures such as the bluffs of a trade war from Washington may ironically help Beijing decision makers to carry out more brave, comprehensive, and profound measures of reform. And taking tax cut as an example, will this reinforce your conviction that we won't have a hard landing. Can you elaborate a little bit the effects and outcome due to the policy execution of such measures, the tax cuts?
Well, I think such a package of policies, especially including the newly added ones like tax cutting, will stimulate enterprises in real economy sectors to make Chinese economy more solid. And meanwhile, I think I observed many policies are designed to expand our domestic market. You're right. Ironically, U.S. is forcing China to do something right. Say, China's economy, through this round of trade friction, China's economy, dependency of China's economy on U.S. market will be reduced. And China
But will not be delinked.
No, not at all. No one can delink the two biggest economies in the world. But I think China's economy will rely more on our domestic consumer market. And ironically, either U.S. economy and U.S. companies will certainly seek for more opportunities from the expanding Chinese domestic market. So in short, through the package of measures launched by the central government, Chinese economy will get more diversified and more solid, and will be more attractive, not only for Chinese enterprises, but also for foreign enterprises, including U.S. firms.
But the rosy picture of Chinese economy will largely depend on resumption of confidence. Having said this, let me go back to Robert. What exactly are your opinions about the issue of employment? This year alone, we'll see up to 8.5 million university graduates leaving the campus. At the same time, we've got mixed reports that more and more young people have been are being made redundant by employers because of the downward economic pressure. Do you believe this will be the paramount concern? I mean, the #1 issue for decision makers in Zhongnanhai?
Well, I can't begin to fathom what the top leadership in Zhongnanhai is actively contemplating, but I wouldn't think that's maybe top. I know there's a certain sensitivity in China because of the Cultural Revolution and other periods where the youth really pushed forward change or created social chaos. But I don't think we're looking at something like that. And just to reflect on what's happened in the Western world, for example, Greece, which has gone through terrible economic times recently, typically what happens is, well, you have immigration in the case of Greece and other European economies where there's a slowdown, or in the case of the U.S., you have young people kind of live at home and bide their time until the economy recovers. I would imagine it's probably more like the U.S. scenario for something that would be likely for China. I wouldn't see that as a top concern, but it is disconcerting in that you have this new generation of talented individuals coming into the workforce, and if they can't find jobs, obviously that's not a good thing. So I think they're perhaps concerned about it. I doubt it would be at the top of the list, though.
Labor shortage is a major concern for the Chinese government and authorities at local level. However, with the advent of artificial intelligence, big data, cloud computing, do you think a shortage of labor forces won't make headlines? I mean, we have different stories about the same issue. Well, what do you think, Wei Wen and Xi Yu?
Well,
Xi Yu, please.
Yeah, thank you. Well, firstly, I noticed I did have similar thoughts and worries, as you mentioned. But just yesterday, I read a news released by our National Bureau of Statistics by saying last year, 2018, the newly born baby was over 15 million. And the result, one of the conclusions is China remain commanding the labor advantages. You can imagine every year we remain, have over 15 million new babies. So basically, because of our base of the population, the so-called labor shortages is not so serious as other countries used to experience. And number two, the really problem we are facing is the structural unemployment. We are not in simple labor shortage. Just look at the market. On one hand, entrepreneurs hunt, failed again for qualified people, employees. But on the other hand, many people are seeking for job opportunities. So it's a structural for employment.
Well, whatever your analysis, you are one step short of mentioning that we have 30 million more males than females, according to the latest statistics of the demographic change. So what do you think of the issue of a labor shortage, or rather the unemployment figure in the job market?
I think for the short term, the top concern is still to create more jobs for the people. It's not labor shortage. But over time, we have to consider about the labor shortage. So that's why we have to develop the AI and robots and artificial intelligence energetically. But it varies from sector to sector, which we have analyzed specifically.
The release of the latest statistics from the National Bureau happened to coincide with an emergency conference hosted by President Xi Jinping to address the issue of drawing a red line, 底线意识, or political security or national security. Now, what do you think of the dramatic coincidence? On the one hand, we see emerging signs of downward economic pressure. On the other hand, obviously, President Xi Jinping gave the alarm. Look, we need to develop a sense of crisis management. What do you think of the background against which he gave this message, wake-up message?
Well, I think he gives an alarming message because China is entering a new age of sustainable development. On one hand, there are indeed a lot of opportunities, and we have got indeed a greater strength than before. But on the other hand, both external and internal situations have been changed greatly. That produce many newly emerging problems we've never seen. So in such a new situation, he really wants to stress the importance of keeping the right line constant.
Thank you so much. In times of crisis, policymakers would do more to assess the threats than showing their guarded optimism. Robert, finally, what do you think of the scenario? Do you think we have more internal problems from within than from without when we look into the future?
Well, I think they all interrelate, actually. So when you talk about these, just like Mr. Yang was mentioning, you know, the trade pressures from the U.S. are actually good for China if it makes it open up more. So I would say the domestic concerns do relate to external factors, and hopefully China will be able to manage both well.
Yes, indeed, we have a set phrase in Chinese vocabulary, 危机 means opportunities do exist in a crisis, or people may thrive on crisis. Hopefully, we keep our fingers crossed for the success of the bilateral negotiations when Vice Premier Liu He visits Washington. I will see you next time. Goodbye.